What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is episode 7 of the StormCast. We are live on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter. The podcast is available everywhere: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, pretty much everywhere where you get podcasts. So go ahead and sub up on there and give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. And of course, we're live on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Stormy and Friends, rumble.com/xxmickens, and twitter.com. That's rumble.com/stormyfriends and twitter.com/xxmickens. Today is Saturday, August 17th, and it is 87 degrees outside. I hope everyone is having a great weekend. And I just want to say, I just dropped a new video on YouTube where I go back to my old high school and I meet up with the coaches and see their new football field. They got turf. They didn't have that back when I went. They got new coaching staff, new athletic director and everything. So it's a pretty good video. I'd go check it out if you haven't yet on YouTube. Drop some gems in there, make some announcements for the upcoming football team for this year. So go check that out. Today, Saturday, there's some good things going on around the world. We got UFC 305 tonight. We got Tai Tuivasa versus Jairzinho Rosenstrike. So that's going to be an amazing heavyweight matchup right there. Then, of course, we got, for the headliner, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, the last style bender. Of course, I'm going for Izzy there, one of my favorite fighters ever. We got some stuff to get into today. I hope everyone's doing good. Drop a W in the chat. So let's jump right into it. I'll give you guys a little stem cell update here. It's been about 2 weeks now, 2-3 weeks since I've gotten my last injections of stem cells. Feeling really good. My workouts are going really well. I can tell I made a big difference on inflammation and spasticity. So I'm actually supposed to be seeing my physiologist or psychiatrist, or is it physiologist, this Wednesday? Not psychiatrist, to talk about getting more stem cells and getting it approved by insurance. So I wouldn't have to come out of pocket for that. So that would be amazing if I can get that done. Hopefully I can get it done like either every month or every other month or something like that. So fingers crossed that, and I'll keep you guys updated on hopefully that goes well. And so yeah, we got some interesting stuff to talk about today. There's Neuralink actually has dropped its second brain chip in its second patient. We all know that the first one wasn't very successful, but this one is actually looking, well, I haven't even read much about it here. If you're watching the live video on YouTube or Twitter or Rumble, and not the audio podcast, we're about to pull up a video here by Tesla, or Neuralink. So yeah, just happened. Neuralink second human trials. Elon Musk reveals new updates. So this looks pretty exciting. I haven't seen this yet, so let's check it out right now.
After several incidents with the first patient that caused the Neuralink chip to lose 85% of its signals, Musk officially confirmed that the company...
So the first one didn't go very well. The brain chip was coming out of the guy who got it. His name slips me right now, but so it wasn't very successful. And then so... they're still working on it. We're still in the first phase of Neuralink. So
he has completed the implant on the second patient with unexpected success. Many changes have been made for the second patient and the new generation of the implant device. Is it safe in the long term? And are there risks after the chip improvements? Find out now. Neuralink's second human trials. After the successful testing on the first patient, Nolan Arbaugh, it's been more than 7 months now, and we
Nolan
finally
Arbaugh.
heard brand new news about the second patient. Elon Musk shared the results of the new chip implant in a recent 8-hour video. As we know, the second patient suffered a spinal cord injury and was paralyzed in an accident. It's not too difficult to see. The second patient also had a similar condition to Nolan Arbaugh. The guy was paralyzed.
So the first two trials are both going to people with spinal cord injuries.
Paralyzed after a driving accident, and Neuralink is thought to be giving him a second life. Like Nolan Arbaugh, in the first few weeks after the successful implementation, Elon did not rush to reveal the patient's identity. Therefore, in a conversation with Lex Friedman, very little info about the patient was mentioned. Musk said, "I don't want to jinx it, but it seems to have gone extremely well with the second implant. There's a lot of signal, a lot of electrodes, is working very well." Clearly, there have been changes in the redesign of Neuralink's implant device after learning from some issues encountered with Nolan Arbaugh. The first generation chip included 64 threads, each thinner than a human hair, with 16 electrodes per thread, totaling 1,024 electrodes. Incredible. However, the chip for the second patient seems to be even more effective. To increase bandwidth and avoid electrode degradation on the threads, Elon stated that the next-gen implant device will have 128 threads, but each thread will only have 8 electrodes. This change, he said, could potentially double the bandwidth if the
128 threads implanted into your brain. So it's going to have way more than the first trial. And, the first one went awry. It went wrong because the electrodes started coming out. So, this just seems like it's going to create more problems, but it could possibly be better than the first trial if they get it done correctly.
thread positions are accurately identified. On top of that, the threads for the second patient will be implanted at a deeper level compared to Nolan Arbaugh. The electrodes connecting to the cortex will be implanted 8 millimeters deep from the brain's surface instead of the previous depth of 3 to 5 millimeters. According to our info, implanting the threads deeper helps secure them more firmly, addressing those issues that we learned from the retraction of threads on the brain, which led to a loss of 85% of the threads and a reduction in signal detection. Additionally, deeper implantation means that even if the threads retract slightly, the electrodes are still going to be deep enough within the brain to remain functional and detect neuronal activity. Now, while it's not clear whether impacting the brain at a greater depth poses a bigger risk to the patient, it is evident that patient number 2 must endure more significant damage compared to patient number 1. For the second patient, Neuralink's team also learned that residual air pockets in the brain are a major cause of the threads on the chip retracting. Explaining this, Neuralink's head neurosurgeon, Matthew McDougall, said, "During any typical brain surgery, a small amount of hair is introduced into the skull. That's because neurosurgeons like to have as much room as possible around the brain."
So the first one went wrong because the air pockets in his brain, and while his brain was moving, pushed out the Neuralink device, which, you would think they would have had that all situated before they did the first implant, but apparently not. It's a learning process for them, for the engineers and the team at Neuralink.
The air pocket, we think, may have contributed to eating up some of the thread slack as the air bubble migrated to be under the implant, pushing the brain away from the implant, McDougall explained. In response, Neuralink's team wants to keep the second patient's carbon dioxide levels in a normal range during surgery to prevent the brain from expanding or retracting. The company plans on better sculpting the implant to prevent a gap from appearing under the skull. That will put the implant closer to the brain and eliminate some of the tensions on the threads, McDougall mentioned. Neuralink had planned to perform a brain chip implant surgery on a second patient back in June, but the plan got canceled due to medical issues. The surgery then took place quietly and only became known when Elon revealed it in a recent interview. So, what did Elon Musk say about the results on that second patient? As mentioned above, although second generation chip got tweaked, it still ended up with a max of 1,024 electrodes. With the latest sharing from Elon, he said that there are 400 active electrodes implanted on the second patient's brain. This means that the chip has not yet achieved the maximum 1,024 electrodes, but only achieved 40%, and only about 50% threads are going to be active right now on the second patient's brain. Previously, Nolan, the first person to get a Neuralink implant, shared that although some of the electrodes had previously migrated out of his brain and were now just about 15% functional, Neuralink has since then restored the chip's functionalities through some software tweaks. Even with only 10 to 15% of his electrodes functioning, Nolan Arbaugh was still able to break his previous world record for speed and accuracy in controlling a cursor with a BCI, Musk said. According to Nolan, if future patients in the trial...
I was confident, in Neuralink when I first heard about it, and it seemed like a miracle procedure that could be done to help people out. But in these early phases, it seems like a lot's going wrong. All right. And seems like, I don't see it going the way I thought it was going to go, which is going to give people full mobility. That seems like that's something that was going to take many years and, many upgrades before that's happening, giving people full functionality, which was the goal for Neuralink. But right now, people are just controlling computers with their brain. And there was already BCI technology like that out around before Neuralink, which you could, attach to your head. And I did some like stuff with physical therapists and occupational therapists when I was first injured, moving my computer with devices, like moving the cursor with my eyes, stuff like that. But it seems like this is just another version of that, another piece of technology that does this for right now, anyway. Elon's got his heart in the right place. Seems like he's trying to do, good by humanity and people with disability, but we got a long way to go.
Can get to 100% or 90% of the electrodes to work, they'll be able to accomplish tasks that he can't do now, offering great hope for our future. Thus, the initial result of 400 functioning electrodes in the second patient is extremely promising. Awesome. The disconnection of threads from the cortex would undoubtedly impact Arbaugh's ability to connect to and control machinery. Now, to address this issue, Neuralink has implanted a step to increase the sensitivity of the brain wave recognition algorithm for the BCI's chip operation. This adjustment aims to eliminate the need for surgery to correct or reconnect the electrodes and threads that have detached from the patient's brain. Neuralink even claims that by improving the algo that translates brainwaves into commands for controlling a computer cursor on the BCI chip, the user's experience, Arbaugh's in this case, will be significantly enhanced. The data bandwidth sent to the computer for control purposes is expected to increase compared to the initial days right after surgery. Musk describes Neuralink's next steps as gigantic, predicting that in the coming years, the company will significantly increase the number of electrodes and enhance signal processing. The electrodes, which are a big component of the impact, collect brain cells and then route them to the electronic devices within the implant. The devices process and wirelessly transmit neural data to a version of the Neuralink app that runs on an external device, like a computer. How did the implantation for the second patient proceed? In fact, the new generation of implants has improved, but the implantation process hasn't changed much from the first patient, except for the depth of the invasion and the number of invasive threads. According to McDougall, once surgeons cut that skin on the top of the head, they flap it open, kind of like opening the hood of a car, make a 1-inch round diameter in the skull, remove that bit of the skull.
That surgery is wicked. Like, imagine getting your skull, a big circle, cut off in the top of your head, and then getting a piece of metal drilled into it. It just seems so barbaric right now. There's got to be easier ways to do this, right? But, who am I? I am not a neuroscientist or neurosurgeon, but it just seems like there's got to be better ways. Maybe some glasses that connect to your head through wires and can pick up your axon signals that way. It's got to. The future has got to bring something less medieval than this.
Open the lining of the brain and then show that part of the brain to the Neuralink robot. This is where the robot shines, he said. It can come in and take out these tiny things, much smaller than human hair, electrodes, and then precisely insert them into the cortex, into the surface of the brain, into a very precise depth.
The robot that's doing all the surgery, though, is pretty awesome. Like, that piece of equipment must be very expensive and must have took a very long time to develop. But it's incredible what they're doing with technology and surgery.
Yeah, in a very precise spot that avoids all the blood vessels that are coating the surface of the brain. And after the robot's done with this part, then the human comes back in and puts the implant into that hole in the skull and then covers it up, screwing it down to the skull and sewing the skin back together. So the whole thing takes a few hours. During the procedure, surgeons make a cut in the skin on the top of the head over the area of the brain that's the most potent representation of hand intentions, according to McDougall. If you are an expert concert pianist, this part of your brain is lighting up the entire time you're playing, he said. We call it a hand knob. Even quadriplegic patients whose brains aren't connected to their finger movements anymore still imagine finger movements, and this knob part of the brain still lights up, the neurosurgeon said.
So they're saying that even if you're, quadriplegic, you have paralysis, thinking about the signals, moving your hands, your fingers, if you can't, it's the signals still going through, right? But the action isn't being made. The firing of the neurons are not completely activating. So
Neuralink's upcoming implant plans. Despite those issues, the company says it has more than 1,000 volunteers ready for upcoming surgical trials. Musk says he hopes to reach his goal of implanting his chip into 8 more patients by the end of the year, but that's still subject to regulatory approval. It's hard to believe, but Neuralink's accelerating its efforts to maximize efficiency and restore function to thousands of patients. Remember the blind sight product that Elon talked about on X? This is also part of Neuralink's upcoming plans and could very well be used in the next 8 patients. Some may have heard of blind sight, but others might not know about it. Musk wrote on X that blind sight is the next Neuralink product after telepathy, as the name of the implant blind sight is an attempt to restore vision to blind patients, even those who are born blind. The company is still in the process.
Oh yeah, they're in the process of also trying to restore eyesight to people with who are blind, and so that would be amazing to see as well. Like, just think about it, like going from not being able to see into, seeing. That's incredible as well. Incredible.
Process of testing this product on animals to get the best evaluation before applying it to humans. Fair enough. In reality, restoring vision with a Neuralink chip will be more challenging than typical cases of paralysis because, as you know, the eyes are a pretty sensitive organ that's connected to the back part of the brain that allows us to see. Blind sight will primarily target the area at the back of the brain known as the visual cortex to stimulate the neurons to function again. The 1024 electrodes from the blind sight chip will directly stimulate nerve cells in the retinal structure. This stimulation mimics light signals, helping the brain form images. The brain will then process the signals from the Neuralink device to create images. Now, the truth is, these images may not be as clear as normal vision, which is almost impossible, but they do help blind people recognize objects and their surroundings.
Wow, it's showing how the person would see if they're blind. It's connected through Neuralink, and that would pick up this, through your visual cortex, would pick up images. But if you're looking at the image on the left versus the right, it's showing the image on the left would be what you would see if you had Neuralink and were blind, and it's like a bunch of dots. It's almost like a caricature of like what would actually be reality. But I mean, it's still amazing that the person would be able to pick up on things and see things and navigate through the world.
Musk has shared about this that resolution is going to be low at first, kind of like early Nintendo graphics, but ultimately may exceed normal human vision. If internal stimulation becomes ineffective, Neuralink could potentially transmit external images to the patient's brain. In this case, the patient might need to wear a digital camera, kind of like a GoPro. In this way, the camera device would wirelessly transmit data via Bluetooth to a mobile device. The phone would then convert the image data into neural signals, which are then embedded back into the Neuralink chip. The chip would subsequently send those neural signals to the brain, allowing you to see the images displayed on the phone. Of course, this scenario would be quite challenging and would require extensive research and time. It does sound a lot like virtual reality, doesn't it? Before Abba got his implant in January, he used a mouth stick to interact with the tablet screen. He stated that with the implant, he can now simply think about what he wants to happen on the computer screen, and the device makes it a reality. He mentioned the device has given him a bit more independence and reduced his reliance on caregivers. After Nolan was implanted with a Neuralink chip, his life changed, and he achieved things he thought he would never be able to do under his current circumstances. The second patient's expected to perform even better than Nolan, as the Neuralink team has gained experience and lessons to avoid error.
Got on a Texas A&M hat. Must be from somewhere in Texas. I know he's from Texas, but A&M, shout out to College Station. I lived there for a couple of years with a high school out there. And yeah, Elon obviously is helping out the Texans.
As compared to the first implantation. Elon has stated that Neuralink brain implants will be the best way for humans to integrate and compete with advanced AI systems in the future. Imagine if Stephen Hawking could communicate faster than a speed typist or an auctioneer. That's the goal, Musk posted to his social media platform X in January 2024. Musk has promoted Neuralink as a technology that could facilitate a symbiosis between humans and AI in the future. In his conversation with Friedman, Musk mentioned that the Neuralink chip might be the best way to prevent AI from surpassing humans and going rogue in a Terminator-like scenario. Musk said Neuralink devices would eventually be able to repair damaged neurons to help people with problems like blindness and paralysis. It can also solve problems.
So basically, Elon's trying to do a lot with Neuralink. These implants are amazing. We're not going to watch this entire video, but shout out to Tesla Car World, posted 3 days ago, explaining they did a very good overview of what's going on. And most of this is just, talking about upcoming Neuralink plans. If you want to see what's going on with Neuralink, just you can finish this video here, but we're gonna jump into the next topic here. Article that I saw that looked pretty interesting called "Moral Values Shift with the Seasons." Moral values shift with the seasons, which I saw that and I was like, what? What does that even mean? So we're going to jump right into it. Posted August 9th, Neuroscience News. All right. A study has found that people's endorsement of moral values fluctuates seasonally, with group-focused values like loyalty, authority, and purity being more strongly supported in spring and fall. This fluctuation has significant implications for politics, legal decisions, and public health, as shifts in moral values can influence behaviors and judgments. The research also suggests a link between anxiety levels and these moral shifts, pointing to the potential impact of seasonal changes on societal outcomes. What? They're talking about spring and fall having different values on the human changing how they act versus winter and summer. So I guess in winter and summer, you have less loyalty, authority, and purity supported by people. That's what they're stating. So be careful for people during winter and summer, because they're less likely to be moral. Which makes a lot of sense. During summer, a lot of people are out and about, and it's dating season, as well as winter. You see a lot of people want to settle down around that time, and winter, summertime, people like to be in their single phase. So let's read on. Endorsement of group-focused moral values peaks in spring and fall. Anxiety levels appear to correlate with stronger support for these values. Seasonal shifts in moral values could impact elections, legal decisions, and public health responses. The finding has potential implications for politics, law, and health, including the timing of elections and court cases, as well as public response to health crisis. The research published this week in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences analyzed survey responses for more than 230,000 people in the U.S. over 10 years and revealed that people's embrace of certain moral values fluctuates depending on the time of year. The seasonal patterns also emerged in smaller data samples from Canada and Australia. So people's endorsement of moral values that promote group cohesion and conformity is stronger in the spring and fall than in the summer and winter, said Ian Holm, the study's first author and doctoral student in UBC's psychology department. Moral values, let's scroll down here a little bit. So moral values are a fundamental part of how people make decisions and form judgments. So we think this finding might just be the tip of the iceberg, in that it has implications for all sorts of other downstream effects. Since 2009, a website established by social psychology researchers has been collecting survey data that measures participants' endorsement of 5 moral values. All right. The 5 values that they are looking at here is loyalty, or valuing devotion to one's group and maintaining strong group bonds; authority, respecting and following leadership and established rules, number 2. So number 3 would be purity, emphasizing cleanliness, sanctity, and upholding tradition. 4, they're looking at care, prioritizing kindness and preventing harm to others. And then the 5th one is fairness, or ensuring equal treatment for everyone. So loyalty, authority, and purity are referred to the researchers as binding values because they encourage conformity to group norms. They also align closely with modern political conservatism. Care and fairness may be considered more liberal values, with their focus on individual rights and welfare. All have been shown by research to guide people's judgments about right and wrong. So in certain times of the year, guys, these 5 qualities, loyalty, authority, and purity, are, and then care and fairness, are all changed, and seen in different ways, but they're all studied here. The researchers found that respondents endorsed the binding values more strongly in spring and fall, but not as much as in summer and winter, a pattern that was remarkably consistent over 10 years. They also found evidence that the summer decrease in endorsement of binding moral values was more pronounced in areas with more extreme seasonal climate differences. So they're thinking climate has something to do with moral values changing as well. Anxiety, possible. So the study observed a potential link between these seasonal moral shifts and levels of anxiety. Using large-scale data on seasonal anxiety provided by Dr. Brian O'Shea, a co-author of the paper and assistant professor of psychology at the University of Nottingham, we noticed that anxiety levels peak in the spring and autumn, which coincides with the periods when people endorse binding values more strongly, said Dr. Mark Schaller, the study's senior author and professor of psychology at UBC. This correlation suggests that higher anxiety may drive people to seek comfort in the group norms and traditions upheld by binding values. The findings have wide-reaching implications with potential examples, including elections. The timing of elections could have an impact on outcomes as shifts in moral values influence political opinion and behaviors. So you'll see, liberal versus conservative values may shift. Their moral values may shift as well during election time, which is, around December time. So in the winter, when people are likely to make uh, less moral less moralistic value decisions, they're so that's going to influence how they vote. So legal judgments, the timing of trials and legal decisions could be influenced by seasonal variations in moral values, because those who endorse binding values tend to be more punitive of those who commit crimes and violate social norms. Disease response. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the extent to which people followed social distancing guidelines and were vaccinated was influenced by their moral values. Knowing these values change with the seasons could help tailor more effective health campaigns. So, depending on whether, COVID was a interesting time, when they enforced people to stand apart and wear masks on their face. Um, it could have been just how they timed it, how the disease was around. It kicked off around December, like some fall, uh, going into winter, going into springtime. Um, so that could have affected how people's judgments and moral values seen for that pandemic, how it influenced them on how they, reacted to that. The intergroup prejudice, seasonal changes in moral values might affect how people view outsiders or those who don't conform to group norms. The research team plans to delve deeper into the connections between anxiety and moral values to investigate how these seasonal patterns influence prejudices and legal judgments. So that's super interesting. Um, who would have thought that time of year affected how we behave? So this video is This Week in Science: Changing Seasons, Changing Morals. The answer is no for me anyway. But hey, if you want to move in before you're married and risk, splitting apart and having a house together, good luck to you. So in the spring and the fall, people have a little bit more morals than in winter and summer, which is, I mean, it makes sense, right?
It's important to respect those morals at those times of the year, whereas maybe in the middle of the summer, it's just not as present for you.
Right. That's so interesting. So you talked about this.
Should be on the screen now. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't have it on the screen, but it's on the screen now. So
being a 10-year study, and then were they just, in terms of collecting data, they were just asking questions? Is that what they did?
This is a really cool place you can go on the internet. It's called yourmorals.org. And it's a website where you go in and it asks you a bunch of questions about what your moral compass says about these different issues. And it's kind of fun to do. It's like those quizzes you can do to find out which Hogwarts character you are or something like that. It's like a personality quiz, but it's real data. And so you give the answers and it shows you how you fall out percentile-wise compared to other people who live in your country. And that's where they get these data. And so it's collected in a really robust way, and they can see those percentiles really clearly.
Can you say that website? What is it?
Yourmorals.org.
Your Morals.
And it's free.
.org. Okay, that's fun.
Yourmorals.org. All right. That was by CTV Your Morning. That was posted 5 days ago. So fairly recent video and findings and research. So I don't know, just keep that in mind when it's, winter and summer and you feel like someone is treating you differently, or you see someone acting funny, or, somebody, that is, not acting themselves. It may just be because seasonal changes do influence behavior. Now, that's not an excuse to go out here and act crazy, right? But it does explain how some people act during these times of year. So this next article that I am about to read here is another interesting one titled, "Can We Hear Temperature? New study says yes." Researchers discovered that humans can detect water temperature through its sound. Using machine learning, they analyze how people perceive thermal properties via auditory cues. The study reveals an implicit skill acquired over time and demonstrates the potential of multisensory integration. It could lead to advancements in understanding human perception and developing new sensory technologies. So humans can discern water temperature by its sound. Machine learning accurately classified water temperatures based on sound recordings. This skill is likely acquired through lifelong exposure to auditory cues. So they're saying that the longer you live, the more your brain learns to pick up on certain sounds, such as the temperature of water. Scientists from the Ivker Institute for Brain Cognition and Technology, or BCT Institute at Reichman University, explored a largely unrecognized perceptual ability and utilized machine learning to clarify the dynamics of cross-model perception, the experience of interactions between multiple different sensory modalities. In a recent published study, the team investigated the possibility for humans to detect the thermal properties of water temperature through its sound, and whether or not it happens consciously. So who would have ever thought that, we can listen to water and be able to understand or decipher the temperature of it. Harnessing principles of multisensory integration, the way the brain combines information from various sensory modalities to form a unified perception of the environment, the team explored the potential of multisensory thermal perception. They also employed a pre-trained deep neural network, or DNN, and a classification algorithm, a support vector machine, to examine whether machine learning could successfully and consistently classify audio recordings of water at different temperatures being poured and create a mapping of these thermal properties physically encoded in sound. Temperature perception is pretty unique in comparison to other sensory experiences, says Dr. Addie Snur, postdoctoral fellow at the BCT Institute and co-author of the study. For vision and hearing, we have dedicated sensory organs like the eyes and ears. With temperature, we rely on specialized receptors in the skin that respond to various temperatures ranges, which we experience as heat and coolness. But in the animal kingdom, we know, for example, that snakes can actually see body heat, which allows them to identify prey. Whoa. The question of whether multisensory perception of temperature extends to humans has been posed before. Previous studies have explored this on a behavioral level, states Professor Amir Amidi, founding director of the BCT Institute. These studies have shown that humans can hear a difference between hot liquids and cold liquids being poured, but not how or why this is possible, he explains. The researchers set out first to replicate previous findings and confirm this surprising perceptual ability, as well as clarify whether or not this ability is innate or acquired, a question that has long been a subject of debate. We also wanted to investigate whether or not people are consciously aware of these differences in the sound properties of thermal differences, says Snur, and also explore what characteristics of the sounds themselves allow for the differentiation in perception, he adds. To accomplish this, the team used a pre-trained deep neural network to characterize recordings of various temperatures of water being poured, a machine learning algorithm to classify the thermal properties of the water, the computational analysis of the auditory features of each recording. What we saw is that participants were consistently able to discern water temperature through its sound, even when they don't believe they could, even when they didn't believe they could, which tells us this is likely an implicit skill acquired through exposure to auditory cues throughout life. Amidi explains simultaneously the machine learning model, which was trained on recordings of hot and cold water, showed a high accuracy in classifying the sounds. The results of the study demonstrate that humans have an ability to learn complex sensory mappings from everyday experiences, and that machine learning can help to clarify subtle perceptual phenomena. The next step is to look into whether or not people will develop model sensory maps in the brain for this experience, the way they do for vision, touch, and hearing, Amidi states. So this guy is pretty much telling us that we're learning that we can map out different senses using the way that they're testing, through auditory testing and other sensory tests. So, in theory, recent claims by Elon Musk regarding Neuralink, back to Neuralink, creating superhuman abilities could become reality if you could couple this same method with brain stimulation, he adds. So we could, alter our abilities and our senses using brain stimulation and mapping. This is a video called "You Can Hear the Difference Between Hot and Cold Water." So it's by Tom Scott. Let's see what you got for us, Tom. Hold on one sec. Share screen. I keep forgetting to share screen. Sorry, chat. If you're watching the video replay here, y'all gotta let me know. But I'll get better. I'll get better at making sure I share the screen. You can hear the difference. Let's see what you got.
And then I was wrong. So be nice, be kind. Steve, take it away.
You have a superpower that you're probably not aware of, the ability to hear temperature, or at least the ability to discern between hot and cold water just using your sense of hearing. And this is something we can test. So I'm going to pour hot and cold water from these identical jugs into these identical mugs. And it's your job to figure out which is which. And I'm going to blur the screen as well.
All right, if you're listening, try to see if you can decipher or tell the difference between hot and cold water as they're being poured into these cups here?
Because there may be some visual cues that would tip you off one way or the other. Okay, here we go.
Pour number one. Here, let's hear that again. Let's go back to pour number one. Okay, that's pour number one. I know.
It should have been.
I know. Okay, so pour number one was cold water, I'm thinking, and I think pour number two was hot water.
It's been quite easy to tell which was which. Feel free to pause the video and leave a comment with your guess if you like. But here's the answer. The first pour was cold and the second pour was hot. And
Got it, chat. I knew it. There's something about the way hot water sounds when it goes into a glass. It sounds different. Like if you've ever made coffee or tea or something, it goes in like heavier.
the reason they sound different is because of the fact that water is viscous or thick, if you like. And the viscosity of water goes down when you heat it. This is something that's easier to see with a liquid like honey. So warm honey is more runny than cold honey. Whereas with water, it's less visually apparent. But when you pour water, the way it splashes into a cup is affected by the viscosity. And this change in the splashing of the water changes the sound that it makes because of various complex fluid dynamic reasons.
That's cold water that he just poured. This is hot. So that's cold. This is hot.
What?
The viscosity of it changes the sound of it. And you wouldn't really, consciously understand that. It's kind of something that, you just kind of learn, I guess, as you go through life.
What's really interesting is this is knowledge you already had due to a lifetime of hearing cold drinks and hot drinks being made. And like many things, this is something that you knew intuitively, even though it wasn't something you were aware of consciously.
Go subscribe to Steve Mold's channel.
Absolutely insane. Very interesting that you can, decipher that. A lot of people don't think about it like that necessarily, but I mean, that's something that in the back of our head, we kind of pick up on over life and learn. So there's probably millions of other things like that that we're just not aware of. But that's interesting, that we can tell the difference between hot and cold water just by the sound of it. All right, so let's go to the next topic here, titled Ancient Viruses Shaped Our Brains. So ancient viruses played a pivotal role in the development of myelin, crucial for complex vertebrate brains. The discovery of retromyelin, a retrovirus-derived element essential for myelin production across mammals, amphibians, and fish underscores the impact of viral genes on vertebrate evolution. The study demonstrates that myelination, a key factor in nerve impulse conduction in vertebrate diversity, owes its existence to ancient viral insertions, challenging previous understandings of evolutionary biology. This convergence of virology and neurobiology opens new avenues for exploring the molecular mechanisms behind evolution and the intricate relationship between viruses and vertebrate development. Retromyelin, a gene sequence derived from ancient retroviruses, is vital for the production of myelin in vertebrates. The presence of retromyelin in diverse vertebrate groups suggests several viral genome integration events, highlighting its role in convergent evolution. Experimental disruption of retromyelin in zebrafish and frogs led to significantly reduced myelin production, proving its functional role in myelination. Researchers report February 15th in the journal Cell that ancient viruses may be to thank for myelin, and by extension, our large complex brains. The team found that a retrovirus-derived genetic element, or retrotransposon, is essential for myelin production in mammals, amphibians, and fish. The gene sequence, which they dubbed retromyelin, is likely a result of ancient viral infection, and comparisons of retromyelin in mammals, amphibians, and fish suggest that retroviral infection and genome invasion events occurred separately in each of these groups. So now we're thinking that viruses are to thank for the myelin and the way our brains developed and why we're so complex as humans and can make, long-term, short-term type decisions, and how we experience life is due to this virus. Retroviruses were required for vertebrate evolution to take off, says senior author and neuroscientist Robin Franklin of Altos Labs, Cambridge Institute of Science. If we didn't have retroviruses sticking their sequences into the vertebrate genome, then myelination wouldn't have happened. And without myelination, the whole diversity of vertebrates as we know it would have never happened. Myelin is a complex fatty tissue that ensheaths vertebrate nerve axons. It enables rapid impulse conduction without needing to increase axonal diameter, which means nerves can be packed closer together. It also provides metabolic support to nerves, which means nerves can be longer. Myelin first appeared in the tree of life around the same time as jaws, and its important in vertebrate evolution has long been recognized, but until now, it was unclear what molecular mechanisms triggered its appearance. The researchers noticed retromyelin's role in myelin production when they were examining that gene networks utilized by oligodendrites, the cells that produce myelin, in the central nervous system. So specifically, the team was investigating the role of non-coding regions, including retrotransposons, in these gene networks, something that hasn't previously been explored in the context of myelin biology. Retrotransposons compose about 40% of our genomes, but nothing is known about how they might have helped animals acquire specific characteristics during evolution, says first author Tanay Ghosh, a computational biologist at Altos Labs, Cambridge Institute of Science. Our motivation was to know how these molecules are helping evolutionary processes, specifically in the context of myelination. In rodents, the researchers found that RNA transcript, or retromyelin, regulates the expression of myelin basic protein, one of the key components of myelin. When they experimentally inhibited retromyelin in oligodendrocytes and oligodendrocyte progenitor cells, the stem cells from which oligodendrocytes are derived, the cells could no longer produce myelin basic protein. To examine whether retromyelin is present in other vertebrate species, the teams searched for similar sequences within the genomes of jawed vertebrates, jawless vertebrates, and several invertebrate species. They identified analogs sequences in all other classes of jawed vertebrates, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians, but did not find a similar sequence in jawless vertebrate or invertebrates. There's been an evolutionary drive to make impulse conduction of our axons quicker, because having quicker impulse conduction means you can catch things or flee from things more rapidly, says Franklin. Next, the researchers wanted to know whether retromyelin was incorporated once into the ancestor of all jawed vertebrates, or whether there were separate retroviral invasions in the different branches. To answer these questions, they constructed a phylogenetic tree from 22 jawed vertebrate species and compared their retromyelin sequences. The analysis revealed that retromyelin sequences were more similar within that between species, which suggests that the retromyelin was acquired multiple times through the process of convergent evolution. The team also showed that retromyelin plays a functional role in myelination in fish and amphibians. When they experimentally disrupted the retromyelin gene sequence in the fertilized eggs of zebrafish and frogs, they found that developing fish and tadpoles produced significantly less myelin than usual. The study highlights the importance of non-coding regions of the genome for physiology and evolution, the researcher says. Our findings open up a new avenue of research to explore how retroviruses are more generally involved in directing evolution, says Ghosh. So that's interesting. Viruses different have different roles, but one of them was to develop our brains from, during evolution, so we can thank viruses for our, how our brains work. So this video is titled "How Ancient Viruses Might Have Changed Our Brains."
We've all learned that neurons are one of the main building blocks of your brain. They shuttle along information so you can think and feel and remember and do things. Neurons communicate with each other using chemicals called neurotransmitters, which get passed through a gap called a synaptic cleft. Now, this way of communication has been the basis for a lot of research into brain chemistry, and it has massively influenced how we design medicines that target the brain. But scientists have observed a new way that neurons can pass information. It's pretty groundbreaking, and it's pretty weird. All this excitement centers around the ARC gene. Like many genes, it encodes a string of mRNA, which encodes a protein, and ARC has been studied in relation to memory and learning. After a neuron fires, which is when an electrical signal gets sent through the cell, the ARC protein and mRNA build up in the cell's dendrites. These are the branches that connect one neuron to others, usually by receiving neurotransmitters. ARC's full name is activity-regulated cytoskeleton-associated protein because it's involved in changing a neuron's cytoskeleton, the network of proteins that gives cells their structure. We think this helps reinforce connections between neurons, which helps us hold on to information. Stronger connections mean stronger memories. And without the ARC gene, we might not be able to remember new things as easily. In a study from 2000, researchers conducted some experiments involving the ARC gene in rats. They used 42 male rats, half of which were dosed with a compound that messed with ARC mRNA and kept them from making proteins. The other half got a control dose that didn't affect ARC. After the brain treatment, the rats were trained to find a hidden platform in a tank filled with water. All of the rats did fine after a couple practice rounds, ARC protein or not. But then 48 hours later, they were all tested on their ability to find the platform again. And rats that had the ARC inhibiting dose in their brains did worse than the control group, which the researchers took to mean that they had trouble forming memories of the practice. In a separate experiment, they tried dosing rats with the compounds 8 hours after the training session, and both groups of rats did about the same on the test. So this makes ARC seem especially important while the rats were learning the task and forming those neural pathways. Now, this bit of research in itself is neat, but ARC is also interesting in human brains, even though we're not entirely sure what it's doing. Abnormal levels of ARC protein have been found in patients with Alzheimer's disease, and studies with genetic analysis have suggested that ARC gene variants may play a role in schizophrenia. And then there's the ARC research that's changing how scientists think about brains altogether. In a paper published in January 2018 in the journal Cell, researchers from the University of Utah described their most recent work on the ARC gene when things took an unexpected turn. The first big surprise was when they looked at some engineered bacteria that were churning out ARC proteins from a rat gene. They noticed that ARC was clumping up into structures that looked weirdly like capsids, tiny protein capsules that protect the genetic information of viruses. Not only that, but more tests showed that ARC capsids formed little packages around ARC mRNA and other RNA that might be hanging out in cells.
I pause him right here. This is pretty technical stuff that he's explaining. But shout out to all 6 viewers right now watching live across Facebook, Rumble, Twitter, and YouTube. So shout out to everybody. Drop a W in the chat.
Cells, which is also like viruses. Then the scientists tried sticking the ARC proteins in a bunch of mouse neurons and noticed that capsids were actually shuttling mRNA between cells. And with the extra mRNA, the receiving neurons could probably generate even more ARC. That's what had the researchers floored. ARC capsids crossed synapses. They carried information between neurons in a way that we thought was exclusive to neurotransmitters. And after some genetic analysis, they think that the ARC gene doesn't just act like a virus. Hundreds of millions of years ago, it probably came from a retrovirus ancestor that infected our ancestors and got into our genome. Now, having virus genes stick around in your body might sound a little risky. I mean, that's a huge problem with HIV. But some estimates suggest that up to 8% of human DNA could have come from retroviruses. Most of this DNA has changed enough that it doesn't do anything, but some research...
Whoa. So 8% of our DNA could be virus influenced. Like, we're not completely human. We are made from viruses, and, that's crazy to think about. We're like aliens.
Researchers have argued that certain viral fragments have been repurposed by our bodies. And now, with ARC, we aren't sure how or why our neurons seem to be using these virus-like capsids. Not to mention, they're not just in the brain. In a separate paper published on the same day in the same journal, researchers from the University of Massachusetts reported on ARC capsids crossing synapses in fruit flies. But in these experiments, they were crossing the neuromuscular junction, where neurons and muscles meet. So it seems like ARC could be involved in connections here too, not just between neurons. All these findings are still really new, so scientists have a lot more questions than answers. They still don't know how this virus-like communication strategy affects memory, or even what else could be ferried around by ARC capsids. Like, what if they help toxic proteins move around the brain, which is a major problem with Alzheimer's disease? So first, researchers studying ARC want to try and repeat these observations, and they'll keep experimenting, looking in mammals instead of isolating.
Okay, so shout out to SciShow Psych here, explaining how the ARC proteins work in our brain and how they influence our biology. We're going to move on to the next article here. So this is titled Mini Touch, Pioneering Thermal Sensation in Prosthetic Limbs. Researchers have unveiled Mini Touch, a revolutionary device that equips prosthetic limbs with the ability to convey thermal sensations to amputees, bridging a significant gap in sensory feedback technology. This breakthrough allows a transradial amputee to differentiate between objects of varying temperatures and experience more human-like touch, enhancing both functional use and emotional connection with the prosthesis. So the people who are amputees, don't have arms or legs, and they get prosthetics, they're unraveling new technology which could give people sensory feedback through their limbs, through their prosthetics. So by integrating off-the-shelf electronics without the need for surgical intervention, the Mini Touch marks a significant advancement towards fully restoring the spectrum of sensory experiences to individuals with limb loss, potentially improving their quality of life and interaction with the environment. And so this technology seems like it would be more helpful for people with even more than amputees, say like people with spinal cord injuries that lose sensation and feeling. Maybe this device could bridge that gap as well and enable people to get senses back and discern between temperatures and stuff like that. The Mini Touch device enables amputees to accurately sense and discriminate temperatures, facilitating more natural interactions with their environment. This innovation requires no surgery for integration into existing commercial prosthetic limbs, making it a readily accessible enhancement. Beyond functional benefits, this device contributes to a greater sense of prosthesis, embodiment, and effective touch, fostering a deeper emotional connection between amputees and their artificial limbs. Wow, that's incredible right there. Sensory feedback is important for amputees to be able to explore and interact with their environment. Now, researchers have developed a device that allows amputees to sense and respond to temperature by delivering thermal information from the prosthesis fingertip to the amputee's residual limb. The Mini Touch device, presented February 9th in the journal Med, uses off-the-shelf electronics, can be integrated into commercially available prosthetic limbs, and does not require surgery. Using the thermally sensitive prosthetic hand, a 57-year-old transradial amputee was able to discriminate between discriminate between and manually sort objects of different temperatures and sense bodily contact with other humans. So that's incredible, being able to losing feeling and then being able to feel a loved one again, or be able to tell whether water is too hot or a pan is too hot. These are very important things. So this is a very simple idea that can be easily integrated into commercial prosthesis. Senior author Silvestro Macera of École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne and Scuola Supérieure Sainte Anna. Temperature is one of the last frontiers to restoring sensation to robotic hands. For the first time, we're really close to restoring the full palette of sensations to amputees. The team previously showed that their thermosensitive technology could restore passive thermal sensation in 17 of 27 amputees. In the new study, they show that the mini touch can easily be integrated into commercial prosthetic limbs and that it enables active thermal sensation during tasks that require feedback between sensory and motor neurons. Beyond the functional importance of being able to sense hot and cold, thermal information could also improve amputees' sense of embodiment and their ability to experience effective touch. Adding temperature information makes the touch more human-like, says senior author Salomane Chokir of École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. We think having the ability to sense temperature will improve amputees' embodiment, that the feeling that this hand is mine. So in the previous episode, we talked about proprioception, and this is something that would affect your proprioception sense and be able to allow someone who has no awareness of where their limbs are in space, they'll be able to feel that, feel their limbs again. So to do this, they integrated the mini touch into the personal prosthesis of a 57-year-old male who had undergone a transradial amputation 37 years earlier by linking the device to a point on the participant's residual limb that elicited thermal sensations in his phantom index finger. Whoa. Then they tested his ability to distinguish between objects of different temperatures and objects made of different materials. Using the mini touch, the participant was able to discriminate between 3 visually indistinguishable bottles of containing either cold 12 degrees Celsius, cool 24 degrees Celsius, or hot 40 degrees Celsius water with 100% accuracy. Whereas without the device, his accuracy was only 33%. Whoa. The mini touch device also improved his ability to quickly and accurately sort metal cubes of different temperatures. So guys, recently I burned my hand, right? Because I have a lack of sensation. The signals are sparse, and feeling hot and cold is sparse throughout my body. So I was unable to feel the hot weight that I was grabbing onto. And when I realized it, that it was burning my fingers, it was too late. My fingers were already spasming and blistering up once I threw the weight down. So something like this could change the life of somebody with, neurological disorder. When you reach a certain level of dexterity with robotic hands, you really need to have a sensory feedback to be able to use the robotic hand to its full potential, says Shakir. Finally, the mini touch device improved the patient's ability to differentiate between human and prosthetic arms while blindfolded, from 60% accuracy with the device to 80%. So 60% accuracy without the device and 80% with the device. So, however, his ability to sense human touch via his prosthesis was still limited compared to his uninjured arm, and the researchers speculate that this was due to limitations in other non-thermal sensory inputs such as skin softness and texture. Other technologies are available to enable these other sensory inputs, and the next step is to begin integrating these technologies into a single prosthetic limb. Our goal now is to develop a multi-modal system that integrates touch, proprioception, and temperature sensations, says Shakir. With that type of system, people will be able to tell you this is soft and hot, or this is hard and cold. The researchers say that this technology is ready for use from a technical point of view, but more safety tests are needed before it reaches the clinic. And they have plans to further improve the device so that it can be more easily fitted. Future models could also build upon the mini touch to integrate thermal information from multiple points on an amputee's phantom limb. For example, allowing people to differentiate thermal and tactile sensations on their finger and thumb might help them grasp a hot beverage, while enabling sensation in the back of the hand might improve the feeling of human connection by allowing amputees to sense when another person touches their hand. So giving someone feeling in back that's major for anyone dealing with neurological disorder. They understand that it can be quite challenging navigating life, not being able to feel temperature or be able to sense things. So this video is titled Artificial Touch Technology Restores Feeling to Prosthetic Limbs. Share screen. All right.
Limbs controlled by your mind. Scientists tell us it's closer to reality than most people might think. There's a new technology called artificial touch. It uses electronic sensors to help people who've lost limbs actually feel things again. Let's say you lose an arm in a car crash. With this new technology, when you go to pick up your phone with your prosthetic, you'll actually feel that you're holding something. Essentially, the sensors use vibrations to restore sensations. And scientists say this technology is just the beginning. On miracles in the works, here's CNBC's Meg Terrell.
Most of us take a handshake like this for granted, but not former Army Sergeant Garrett Anderson from Champaign, Illinois, who lost his right hand back in 2005 while serving in Iraq and out on patrol.
You see a lot of soldiers come back from deployment or tours, fighting wars. A lot of them get, legs blown off, arms blown off, and have to get prosthetics, have to go through a lot of therapy and relearn, life with, missing limbs. So something like this could definitely help somebody suffering, help our soldiers fighting for this country.
Sergeant Anderson was hit by a roadside bomb.
A shrapnel came up through the vehicle. It severed my arm and broke my jaw in 7 spots, and I have a mild traumatic brain injury.
Today, he uses this, a fully robotic prosthetic. Bionic limbs like these work by receiving signals from the user's own muscles.
Super light, super strong.
Adil Akhtar is the creator of the Ability Hand and CEO of Psionic, a small startup outside of Chicago.
It's actually detecting all the different positions I'm making with my finger.
The latest model, armed with human-like movement, quick reflexes.
If you're not watching the video podcast, you're just listening. He was moving his hand, and then the robot was mimicking his movements. Pretty interesting.
And engineered strong enough to withstand even an arm wrestling match.
And it takes a lot of strength to withstand the forces of arm wrestling, and so we designed the Ability Hand to be that strong.
But what makes the Ability Hand different is it provides touch feedback to the wearer.
We have touch sensors that relay that information back to your brain through a vibration motor so that when you actually touch an object, you can feel it.
Users are now able to feel the difference between holding something gently and crushing it. A distinction Sergeant Anderson appreciates deeply, now finally able safely to hold his daughter's hand.
It was kind of surreal, that sensory feedback of her touching my hand and feeling the vibration through the prosthetic. It was kind of neat because obviously I could never feel that.
Today, bionic limbs like these are in their infancy, limited to just simple vibrations. But more complex sensations like temperature and even texture are on the horizon, researched by scientists across the country.
What we need to do next is convey the information that the sensors record back to the user in a natural and intuitive way.
Dr. Levi Hargrove, scientific chair at the Shirley.
This kind of makes you think, like, what could we use this for, right? Like hooking it to someone's head, kind of like Neuralink, but using it to control your whole body and to move that way. I don't see why that's out of the realm of possibility.
Ryan Ability Lab in downtown Chicago says in the future, implanted devices will be able to stimulate the nerves directly, harnessing the power of artificial intelligence to more fully merge man and machine.
The field of AI is just accelerating so quickly.
Just like Elon said about integrating with AI, that's pretty much what he's doing with Neuralink, and we can use these type of technologies to heal disorders and disabilities. This video is It's a good
Here
video.
of self-driving cars, industrial control robots, they all use these algorithms. The importance of AI is going to be absolutely critical to unlock the potential of these limbs.
Dr.
Absolutely amazing what type of stuff that they're doing with AI. Guys, there is no getting around the fact that we're gonna need AI here, and we're gonna, you know, it's already on its way of adapting and growing. So we're gonna have to adapt and grow with it. And so technologies like these that are coming out, BCI and that mini touch that we just talked about is pretty groundbreaking stuff. So we're gonna move on to the next article of the podcast here. This is the last little topic I saw that I found interesting, titled "Voice Pitch Influences Social Perceptions Globally." A new study unveiled the significant role of voice pitch in shaping social perceptions across different cultures. The study involved over 3,100 participants from 22 countries who evaluated voice recordings for attractiveness, formidability, and prestige. Lower voice pitch was universally preferred for long-term relationships and associated with increased formidability and prestige in males. This cross-cultural research underscores the evolutionary roots of how voice pitch affects social status and mate selection, highlighting its importance in human interaction and social mobility. You kind of subconsciously know this, right? That, you know, hearing how someone talks, you can kind of judge their, you know, maybe their status or their, you know, their motives. And your attractiveness to them as well. Lower voice pitch is preferred globally for long-term relationships and signals higher social status and formidability in males. The study's findings are consistent across 22 countries, suggesting a universal aspect of human psychology related to voice pitch perceptions. Voice pitch's impact on social evaluations is influenced by societal factors such as relational mobility and violence rates, indicating its adaptability to social environments. If you're looking for a long-term relationship or to boost your social status, lower your pitch, according to researchers studying the effects of voice pitch on social perceptions. They found that lower voice pitch makes women and men sound more attractive to potential long-term partners, and lower voice pitch in males makes the individual sound more formidable and prestigious among other men. The results of the cross-cultural study, published in journal Psychological Science, have implications for understanding human evolution and how people today confer and evaluate social status. You know, being in school, you kind of pick up on this, you know, a lot of, you know, adults or males or coaches, you know, tend to have like the deeper voices and kind of respect them more, right? Versus someone who has a high pitched voice, especially a male. So that's, I mean, of course, this a lot of times you can't control. I mean, you can control your voice pitch, I'm sure, by training and being conscious and aware of how you're speaking. But you know, some people are born with high pitched voices, right? And so this may affect how they get along and are perceived in the world. Vocal communication is one of the most important human characteristics, and pitch is most perceptually noticeable aspect of voice, said David Putz, study co-author and professor of anthropology at Penn State. Understanding how voice pitch influences social perceptions can help us understand social relationships more broadly, how we attain social status, how we evaluate others on social status, and how we choose mates. To study how voice pitch influences social perceptions, the researchers selected 2 male and 2 female voice recordings, all repeating the same sentence. They edited the clips to produce the average pitch for the speaker's sex plus a higher pitched voice and lower pitched version of each voice for a total of 12 clips, and divided the clips into male, and female pairings. The researchers then asked more than 3,100 participants, 22 across 22 countries, representing 5 continents and New Zealand, to listen to the paired recordings and answer questions about which voice sounded more attractive, flirtatious, formidable, and prestigious. The researchers found that women and men preferred lower-pitched voices when asked which voice they would prefer for long-term relationships such as marriage. They also found that a lower male voice pitch made the individual sound more formidable, especially among younger men, and more prestigious, particularly in among older men. So if you're a lower voice individual and you're young, it makes you seem more formidable. And as you get older and your voice is lower pitched, you're perceived as more prestigious. Perceptions of formidability and prestige had a large impact in social societies with more relational mobility, where group members interact more often with strangers and more violence. We looked at homicide rate as a way of quantifying the degree of physical violence in a society, which was probably an important factor for our male ancestors' reproductive success, Putt said, explaining that human males often experienced threats of violence in competition over mates, and those who were bigger or seemed bigger tended to have more success. Human males have sex traits such as upper body muscle mass that look like they were shaped by male use of force or threat of force to win mating opportunities. A low voice pitch exaggerates size. It makes an organism, whether it's a person or non-human primate, seem big and intimidating. The fact, he scrolled way too far. How did I even get down here? Scroll back up here. Where was I at? Oops. Keep going. Sorry about that, guys. Where we at? Just found that emails. I think we're a little bit higher. Okay. So the fact that participants across cultures perceived a lower male voice pitch as conferring formidability and high social status suggests that these characteristics were likely conferred to our ancestors as well, Putt said. He likened that the effect of that Darth Vader's voice in the Star Wars franchise. No matter where the character goes in the galaxy, his low pitch is perceived as formidable because larger beings tend to produce lower frequencies. The findings suggest that deep voices evolved in males because our male ancestors frequently interacted with competitors who were strangers, as they show how we can use evolutionary thinking and research from non-human animals to predict and understand how our psychology and behaviors vary across social contexts, including cross-culturally. So, stating here that in the past, our ancestors would have to fight off invading tribes and threats from other societies and tribes. So a deeper voice would convey higher status and ability to defend and protect, and stronger people. Deeper voice makes you be perceived as stronger and more formidable and higher status. Male traits such as deep voices and beards are highly socially salient, but this new research shows that salience of at least one of these traits varies in predictable ways across societies, and it suggests that others, such as beards, do too. In addition, the researchers found that men perceived females with higher pitched voices as more attractive for short-term relationships, and women perceived higher pitches as sounding more flirtatious and being more attractive to men. In societies with lower relational mobility, where group members are more likely to know one another, women may perceive these flirtatious voices as a threat to existing social networks. According to the researchers, female secondary sex traits like voice look like they're much better designed for mate attraction rather than threatening each other physically. Putt said, we found that we could use relational mobility to predict women's sensitivity to raised voice pitch in competitors. Sensitivity may have been higher in societies with lower relational mobility because flirtatious behavior is not just a threat to your romantic relationship, but your friendships as well. A common misconception is that early humans lived only in small-scale societies where everybody knew each other, Putt said. This was sometimes true, but the ethnographic and archaeological records show that group sizes were often large. Although many people lived in small societies, he added, mounting evidence suggests that they periodically joined other groups to form large-scale societies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. They sometimes lived in these larger groups for months at a time and maintained these social networks even when they returned to living in smaller communities. This study suggests that voice pitch is relevant to social perceptions across societies, Putt said. But it also shows that the extent of our attention to voice pitch, which when making social attributions, is variable across societies and responsive to relevant socio-cultural variabilities. In a society where higher relational mobility and you have less, in a society where there's higher relational mobility and you have less direct information about your competitors, people appear to be more attentive to an easily identifiable, recognizable signal like voice pitch. In addition to Putt's, other contributors from Penn State include former graduate and undergraduate students To Ang, first author and now an assistant professor at Hewlett University, Alexander Hill, associate teaching professor at University of Washington, Jessica Lay, doctoral candidate at Boston, Catherine Hess, currently at Santan Behavioral, Michael Hess. All right, so these are a lot of the credits here. Additional contributors represent colleges and universities across the United States, Mexico, Canada, India, and various other countries. So that's kind of one of those other things that we kind of, perceive. We don't really realize, consciously that we're perceiving someone in a certain way. But this is one of those things that, is innate in us and goes far back from our evolution. So this video by Penn State is the last video we're going to watch here for the podcast. Appreciate everybody who tuned in to this episode. Right now we have 6 people watching still. So shout out to everybody in the chat. And let's jump into this last video. Do people find higher, low-pitched voices attractive?
Defining human characteristic. And most of our vocal communication isn't the words that we say, but how we say them. In new research, we found that.
So how does voice pitch affect social perception?
In our new research, we found that a high pitch made women's voices sound more attractive to men for a short-term relationship.
So high-pitched voices for women make them attractive short-term. Long-term, deep voices for male and female make them more attractive. So if you're a woman and you're trying to secure a mate, you might want to have a high pitch. And if you're a male trying to secure a mate, it's better to have a low pitch.
And women perceived a high pitch to be more flirtatious and more attractive to men. We found that a low pitch increased attractiveness in both men's and women's voices for a long-term relationship. And a low pitch made men's voices sound more formidable and more prestigious.
Did any of these findings surprise you? No.
And what was really interesting is that we found a low male voice pitch increased perceptions of formidability and prestige, especially in societies with higher homicide rates and higher levels of relational mobility. That is, where people interact with strangers more.
So in deeper cities, in big cities, this is having a deeper voice would, benefit you more. But I mean, just cross the globe, this is probably a good rule of thumb to follow as far as attractiveness and how you're perceived with your voice pitch.
And we think this is because in places where people have less direct knowledge about the people that they're talking to, their competitors, then they're forced to rely on easily recognizable cues and signals like voice pitch. So this research can really help us understand how humans communicate.
Awesome. Great video. Great podcast. That's the end here. We're gonna we talked about a lot of things. We're gonna end it here. It's just very, very interesting episode. We talked about moral value, how moral values shift with the seasons. We learned that we can hear temperature. We learned about ancient viruses shaping our brains, and our ancestry, and how we developed in that sense, ancestrally. And then we learned about how sensation is being pioneered in people with prosthetic limbs, and which can hopefully benefit everyone facing disability or neurological disorder. And lastly, we talked here about voice pitch and its influence on your social perception globally. So I just want to thank everybody again for joining me today. Appreciate it. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or any of those sites, go ahead and leave a 5-star and a like on this episode and on the podcast, and leave me some feedback. Guys, in the future, we got some episodes coming up here. We got some guests that I want to interview. We're gonna do different type of content. Not every episode is gonna be so informational and research based, but I find this type of information interesting. I like learning, especially when it comes to recovery and everything like neuroscience. Having a spinal cord injury, it relates to me directly, and so I like to stay on top of this type of things, all new trending research, and anything that could possibly help me in my recovery journey. So, guys, that's been another episode. Thank you for joining me. If you would like to support the podcast further, you can always hit the link in the description and join the Patreon and support the podcast that way. For just $5 a month, you can get behind the scenes and a lot of other perks, group calls, one-on-one calls, special content, special behind the scenes content. And I'm constantly working on trying to provide more and more content on the Patreon. So give it a try if you want to support the podcast. And I also, guys, just want you guys to leave some feedback in the comments and let me know any other, some questions you may have or any other topics that you want to hear me touch upon. And yeah, that's pretty much it here, guys. We got somebody in the chat here. D's Gaming. Shout out to D's Gaming. How you doing, man? How's your Saturday going? And yeah, chat. This is gonna be the end of this video. This was another decently long episode, but appreciate everyone who stuck around and enjoyed the episode. And just like that, we'll see you in the next episode. Love you guys and see you soon.